So when you graduate from Service Academy, you have a 5-year military commitment, and all my buddies that played football were, we're gonna go in the Marine Corps and we're gonna go kill bad guys. And I was just, oh yeah, that's what I'll do. That sounds good. And I just got engaged to my, now wife, and she kind of came to me and said, "Hey, is there any way that you can pick a safer job, like maybe one that's not voluntarily putting yourself in harm's way?" And that really led to a long conversation of, what do we want our lives to be? Do we want to be in the military for 20 years moving around, or, do we want to get back home and be around family? We're born and raised in Las Vegas, both of us, and both of our families, to this day still live here, and family's really important to us. So we wanted to raise our children, around, family and grandpa. I never met either one of my grandpas growing up. They both died before I was born. And so that's really important to me to have, my girls be brought up with, living grandparents. And we're very fortunate, that we have a big family here. And so I chose financial management. And I remember sitting in the middle of Quantico, Virginia. It was like, I don't know, -9 outside with wind chill, and they're reading off where everyone's getting their duty station and their orders. And, they're like, "Lieutenant Smith, you're going to Lejeune, Lieutenant whatever, you're going to Lejeune, Lieutenant whoever, you're going to, Pendleton." And people would get like, "Oh man, I'm jealous. Like, you're getting somewhere warm." And then they were like, "Lieutenant Pearson, Miami, Florida." And all 200 people just like looked at me and they were just like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you would get Miami." And so I spent all 5 years on active duty in Miami, Florida, and I ran the budget for Central and South America out of
Wow.
Marine Corps Forces South. So kind of a weird place for a second lieutenant to go, because everyone else there had kids that were my age, and I didn't really have any friends. But professionally, I got a lot of experience within finance, and then really figured out that I kind of had a passion for it and I liked it, and I didn't want to go into corporate finance. And there was some, military programs available for, going to get my MBA and going to get, additional certifications and designations within the financial planning arena. So I really was just a professional student for 5 years. My whole time on active duty, I was in school. I never left,
Wow.
and this was I'm the kind of guy that kind of plants his flag in something early on and was just like, okay, like this is what we're doing. This is the
Hmm.
plan. So let's just go out and get all the education I can possibly get before I start, so that I can be very effective in guiding clients forward through their own lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a testament to show that, the military can be such a great path for a lot of different careers, and you can, obviously you're serving your country, and you're going to be very proactively involved in whatever it is you're doing in the military. But at the same time, you're going to have downtime, and you're going to have opportunities to pursue other things that are really going to help you in the future. So that's what I found to be the case too with real estate. So that's awesome. And you also discovered that you hated humidity, I guess, too, because you
Yeah,
decided to
no,
move back to.
Miami, Florida is a fun place for about 6 months to live. And then my wife got pregnant and couldn't even walk out of the front door because she's in her first trimester, sick as a dog, and
Yeah.
it's 95 degrees and
Oh,
95% humidity. Yeah, so it was a tough place to have young children for sure.
yeah. Nice. Well, I'm glad you got back to the desert. So I tend to be really focused, obviously, again, on high cash flowing rental properties because I eat, sleep, and breathe it, and that's what I know best. And I probably have a very unbalanced portfolio. I'm guessing you would tell me, since pretty much everything I have is invested in real estate. And I've tried different investments over the years. I even took part of my loan as a junior or a cow at West Point and was day trading for a little while, which did not go well. Um, and I've tried just about everything else out there. Um, but I've always come back to the realization that I can just create so much higher returns with these rental property, buying the right properties, because I really understand it and I know how to buy the most efficient property, and I can control it a lot better than some equity that I have no control over, obviously. So how do you approach a client like me and help someone become more well-rounded or diversified, or should I even be, do you think, in your opinion?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. The financial industry itself has been very transactional in
Hmm.
nature, just really over, I mean, let's call it the last 100 years or so, right? It's been very much, hey, Kirby, give me all your money and I'm going to go buy these stocks and I'm really good at buying stocks and therefore I justify my commissions that I'm going to make off of your money. That's really how the industry had worked. And even today, if you go to most guys that call themselves, financial advisor or wealth manager or financial planner or whatever title they give themselves, and you're a real estate investor or a privately held business owner, it's kind of the same concept. You're going to go to me and say, hey, why would I put money into the S&P 500 and get 10% return when I know that I can place that same capital into a real estate property, get a higher appreciation percentage plus cash flow plus tax incentives? Or privately held business owner, hey, yeah, but I can put the same money back into my business and I know I can get 20x that return. So I think when you approach traditional finances from that perspective, yeah, there hasn't really been a lot of advice given to real estate investors because there's no way for most guys to monetize off of it. And
Mm.
so you sort of see this whole demographic of investors that really don't get a lot of, you know, high sophisticated advice around their finances.
Hmm.
The way that I look at it is, hey, Kirby, you're really good at buying real estate and picking real estate, and if that's what you know and how you want to create returns and cash flow, that's great. However, you need to make sure if you're going to put all your chips on the table in one asset class, you need to ensure that all the ancillary parts of your balance sheet are airtight, right?
Mm.
All of your estate planning, your trust documents, you need to make sure that you have, a very, very robust tax strategy. You have to make sure that you have the right insurances, right? You got to have the right liability protections. You got to have, compartmentalization of risk of your properties in different LLC structures and that you're not taking too much liability risk within the properties. Something as simple as the right car insurance. And people always out, and one of the first questions I always ask people is, what, like, do you know what your liability limits are on your car insurance? And they're
Mm.
like, no, I have no idea. Whatever
Right.
whatever Geico told me to get. And I've just seen it too many times where someone's driving home from work or they're going to the grocery store and they're not driving in a business capacity. They're not in a business car. They run into someone and that person hires a personal injury attorney and they've got state minimums on their car insurance and they're worth $1 million, $2 million. And guess what? If you don't have the right insulation and the right protection, everything you just built, boom, like it's gone. And yes, can they come after your LLCs that have your real estate? No. But if they take all of your cash that's sitting in your bank account, well, guess
Yeah.
what? Now you can't make the next deal, or you're going to have to sell a property to create liquidity on your balance sheet so you can put food on the table, right? So it's everything's connected. But I
Mm.
think traditionally everyone looks at this is my real estate and I'm only going to make real estate decisions around it. This is my retirement money and I'm only going to, when in reality, everything is connected. And I think a really, really good strategy is when you're able to leverage one asset that has no correlation whatsoever to another asset for an overall economic gain. And I think that's the name of the game is understanding where all your assets are, what liability and risks exist with each of those, and then what efficiencies can we find by leveraging one asset for another.
Mm. Got it. Okay. And that kind of that kind of ties into your living balance sheet tool. And if you're listening to this, you can get a copy of this tool. But I was just looking at it. You sent it over to me a couple weeks ago, and it's really interesting because it kind of puts all these different categories that you just talked about into one. It's one like picture. It's one dashboard, I guess, when you log into it. So you enter in what your different components are, and it asks you all the questions that around these different components, and then you can see one overarching financial picture, and maybe where you have some lack or some categories that you haven't attended to. So I want to talk through the different categories to understand where people listening to this could focus more. So could you kind of share what categories you think are most important?
Yeah, I think really good financial planning. I think we can break it down into four domains. And we focus so much on the balance sheet because I think a lot of people are very used to looking at balance sheets, um, but they've never really set up, really their own to include every facet of their entire life. Like maybe they include a couple components, but not everything. And so really those domains break down to, your assets, everything you own, your liabilities, everything you owe. You subtract, the assets from the liabilities, you're left with your net worth. But I think there's two other components that need to be added on top of a traditional balance sheet. And that's the protection of your balance sheet. These are things like different types of insurance that you get. These are things like your wills and your trust and your legal entities, life insurance, disability insurance, health insurance, umbrella insurance, liability. Like there's a lot of different products that are available that you can buy to ensure that net worth is never detrimentally impacted, right? And the reason why I think that really knowing your net worth number is so important and knowing it to the penny is because when I think about like what financial freedom means that your asset base and your net worth is sufficient enough to provide cash flow to you for the remainder of your life without running out of money. Like that's the
Mm.
mathematical equation of financial freedom. Now that means different things to different people, but that's the math behind it, right? And so you can kind of think of the balance sheet itself. There's a really good story. A lot of people are familiar with it about General Mattis back in Fallujah, and he was talking to a reporter, and one of his staff ran up to him and was like, "Hey, we're going to launch this airstrike," and he just said, "Yep, do it." And the reporter kind of looked at him funny, like, how can you just make a decision like that without, you didn't even ask where it was? And he kind of looked at the reporter and kind of laughed. And he was like, I don't need to think about making this decision. I've been planning on making this decision and I've modeled this out in my head 1,000 different times.
Mm.
Like I knew this was going to happen. And I think if we take that analogy and we apply it to having a really, really well thoughtful, built out balance sheet, what that means to you as a real estate investor and what that allows you to do in the marketplace and with opportunities that arise is when you have really, really good cognizance of what your financial picture is currently, you can start to simulate things. Like, there's going to be a last minute home that comes up and you got 60 days to close. And instead of scrambling at the last minute, like let's stress test it. Like let's simulate that out. What if I need $200,000 in 60 days? What's my plan? How do I do that? Or on the flip side of things, what happens if the unexpected happens? What
Hmm.
happens if I can't go to work for a month, 3 months, 6 months? What if I get sick? What if my kid gets sick and takes me away from work or doing my deals or focusing on risk? Like stress test all those things. And without having a true cognizance of what your financial balance sheet looks like, it's impossible to model those simulations out.
Mm. So is that what you typically do? Because I was going to ask you about that because I like that definition of financial freedom, that your assets pay are are enough to pay you till the day you die. Support your lifestyle for the rest of your life. And on the surface, that sounds logical and sounds pretty easy to calculate, but it's easy to calculate based on today. I need this much money, and but then you have another kid, you have, like you said, an illness that comes up, you have new opportunities, a change of jobs, all these things that it's very difficult to predict. And so I think that's where people then start to go, no matter what level they're at financially, it's never enough, because they're like, well, yeah, but if this black swan scenario occurs, now I'm screwed, and so they're left with this feeling of anxiety that, the answer is always more. And so I think my goal, and what I like to think about with financial freedom, is to get to a place of feeling peace, and not feeling like more is the solution, but feeling like you have enough. And that's a very tricky place to get to because we don't know what's in store. So I guess when you're looking at somebody's living balance sheet, what is it that you're looking for? And then how do you help them answer that question of what's enough for them?
Yeah. So I think number one is I think most people's financial lives are like the junk, like the drawer in the kitchen, like the junk drawer, if you know what I mean. You probably have one, right? It's like you get important mail or you have something on the kitchen counter, but you don't want it out, but you want to keep it.
Yeah.
And there's, my house we have like 7, right? Like little kids, like they're just filled to the brim. But that's most people's financial lives, right? They're this proverbial unorganized junk drawer in the kitchen. And so really what I look for, number one, is, how did our balance sheet get to where it is today? Like, what were you trying to accomplish when you set up X, Y, and Z? Right. And it's very interesting to hear people's perspective on this, because you ask someone, hey, I see that you have a, self-directed IRA and you've got $100,000 sitting in it. What take me through how we got to that point. And it's like, oh, well, I had an old IRA, old 401k, and, I didn't really know what to do with it. So, I rolled it over into a self-directed, and like, okay, like what's it invested in? Well, nothing right now. It's just been sitting in cash. Like, I've heard that a lot from people. Like, what was the plan for it? Well, I don't really know. So people kind of make these decisions just like, oh, I heard about a self-directed IRA. Like, I should do one.
Yeah.
But they don't really have a purpose for it. They just kind of do it. Or like, hey, I see you have, $675,000 worth of death benefit, a life insurance policy. Like, how did you come up with that? Oh, I don't really know. Like, I had a kid and that's what the agent told me to get. So that's what I got. And it's really interesting. You kind of, if you keep asking these questions around people's, like how they got to the point that they're at on their balance sheet, it's very commonly, I don't know. It's just kind of what happened. There very rarely is someone that says, well, I have this percent in, this retirement account to accomplish X. I have this amount over here to accomplish Y. I did this and I set this up. Like, very rarely, and this is regardless of net worth, like you'd be amazed. People think like super high net worth, like think of like the wealthiest person and you're like, man, that guy's really got it together. They know they're the biggest messes out of everyone. They've just been able to out-earn poor financial decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's really never a cohesive, unified approach to making investment decisions. It's usually just kind of piecemealed. So that's usually, just asking people how they kind of got to where they are in their balance sheet. And I think it's sort of it's a tough thing for people to do. It's sort of a reality check of, I haven't really put a lot of time and thought into this. I don't really know. I haven't updated my trust since 2003, and I've had 4 kids since then and acquired 2 businesses and 10 different properties. And I know I need to go get that redone. I just don't really want to.
Yeah.